Welcome to Engaging and Empowering School Libraries, a podcast that aims to raise the profile of school libraries by talking about topics that are current across education and teaching. I'm delighted tonight to be joined by a special friend and colleague, Stony Evans. We have been working collaboratively for nearly 7 years, starting when we were both ready to open the doors of our school libraries internationally for the benefit of our teachers and students back in 2013. Tonight, we're going to share our journey of international collaboration, highlighting the benefits, as well as giving you some ideas that you might want to try yourselves. So thanks so much for joining me tonight, Stony. I'm glad you found the time eventually. You're a busy man.
Well, I'm grateful to be here and thank you for the opportunity, Liz.
No problem. So can I get you to introduce yourself and tell me a little about your career path?
Sure, and it's really changed the last few years, but my name again is Stony Evans, and was a public school educator here in the United States, in the state of Arkansas, for 25 years. About half of that I spent as a band director, and then I shifted over to school librarianship midway through that career, and finished that career as a school librarian, both at the middle school level, and I spent most of it at the high school level. I had but I'm also in the Arkansas Army National Guard, and so I've had that dual career. And due to COVID and a family emergency with my dad's health in 2020, I decided to step away and actually retire early. I had enough years in, retired early from public school in 2020, and was able to devote really these last 3 years almost to my military career, while still keeping a foot in the door with school librarianship. I teach adjunct for McDaniel College in Maryland for school librarianship graduate students, and have tried to keep my feet in both the military and school librarianship as much as possible, especially now that COVID is something that is not as big of a concern as it was globally since 2020. So I guess that's it in a nutshell. And as of right now, I'm really working about 3 different part-time jobs, with 2 of those being military, and one of them being school librarianship.
I must admit, I've been watching your career with interest, because it's certainly had its highs and interesting scenarios, hasn't it? It's been one of those things that, you just think something's going to happen, and no, you're off on something else. So you do keep me on my toes. We're going to focus a little bit on the time that you were a school librarian. Like I said in my introduction, we met in 2013 when I was looking to do something more with collaboration, and I had seen I'd seen this thing called Mystery Hangout that was seemed to be being talked about a lot in America by the school librarians there. Can you tell me a little bit about your interest in global communities and how that started?
Thinking back, really, I need to talk a little bit about blogging, because that's probably where all of this started. I mean, I'd heard about Twitter, and I'd created a Twitter account, and had started promoting our school library programs and things that we were doing on our Facebook, as that became something that was accepted with our public school administration, to kind of tell the story of what was happening. I couldn't get administrators always to come to the school library for the events that we had, because they're busy. They're busy people. They're pulled all over the building, and I thought, well, what if I started a blog? And I saw Shannon Miller, who's a very strong leader in our profession for school librarians in the United States. She had spoken at a conference that I invited you to speak at with me virtually, but I saw that she had a blog, and I thought, oh gosh, I could do that. I could just write about the things that we're doing, and I could share that on social media, and my administrators will see it. Well, my interest in the global community happened. I started that blog in 2014, so we may have met after 2014, now that I think about that. So. Because I started writing, and people not only locally started reading the things that we were doing, and I always just tried to tell, hey, here's what we did in the library. Here's some pictures, there's a video clip. Parents were seeing it, administrators were seeing it, but I didn't realize that people around the country were starting to look at the different things that we were doing. And then I get this tweet in, was it 2015 or 2016? I'm sorry, Elizabeth.
It's all right. If you talk
but,
about the one that I sent you, that was
yes.
2016. Yeah, 2016.
So I remember getting this tweet from Elizabeth Hutchinson. I'm like, oh, cool, I'll enter this later. And because it was like on a weekend. And then
Typical me.
when I had time to really look at it, I was like, Guernsey, where's that? And then I looked it up and I'm like, oh my goodness, somebody from outside of the States read about Mystery Skype. That's what it was, Mystery Skype, Mystery Hangouts. Yeah. And I was like, oh, wow. And that's really the moment that my mind really expanded. And I began to look through a much larger lens that the social media presence, the things that we're sharing out there really are limitless. Who can have access to those? So I would say that was a pivotal point for me in 2016 when you reached out to me and I realized how far our stories can go.
Absolutely. Well, my story goes back to 2013 when I tried to do a collaboration. So I had this idea that I wanted to collaborate with somebody. I wasn't quite sure who. And there was a thing called Scoopish. It was an online, I think it still exists. It's an online platform, but I had been following some really interesting school librarians again, but from across the world. And there's one lady, Pippa, and I can't remember her surname, but Pippa started talking to me, and we came up with this idea about we had a book award, an annual book award called the Greenaway Award, and they had an award called something like chocolate something. Theirs sounded far more cooler than ours did. But the idea was we would send our books to Canada and they would send their books to us, and we would spend time looking and talking to each other. I hadn't really thought about it properly enough at that point because the time difference between Canada and the UK is too many hours. And the only way that we could connect our students was by bringing our students back to school at about 6 o'clock in the evening. But they were really keen to do it. Did it work? I don't think it worked. The video didn't work in 2013. But they were typing to each other and they were really excited to be talking to students on the other side of the world. And that was my hook. So when I saw you talking about mystery hangouts, I thought, this is it. So that Sunday morning was the moment that I thought, right, I need to do something. Do you think we appreciated at the time how cutting edge and a front runner we were?
No, I remember looking at this question and talking with Cindy about it because we were both going through a lot of the same things together. Because my wife, just some context, my wife was also a school librarian at the elementary level, so we shared ideas and I think we were just trying to find ways to be relevant to our learning communities. And I don't know if it ever really sunk in that, oh wow, this is really new. This is something that everybody's not doing. I don't know when I realized that it was at the forefront of being trailblazers.
I think it might have been our international session. Because let's explain a little bit about what we're talking about. A mystery hangout or a mystery Skype, as it was then, was two librarians across the other side of the world connecting with each other, and it was two classes. So the idea is that the adults know where each other are, but the students don't.
Yes.
I don't know about you, but for us, it was more of a geography related exercise.
Yes, for us as
So,
well.
so our geography teacher was really interested. Um, they set up the students so that they have different tasks. So some of them were the ones looking at Google Maps, somebody else was looking at the atlases, somebody else was looking at I can't think. Somebody else was doing the recording, somebody else was doing the speaking and the answering the questions. So it
Yes.
was question and answer where the other students could only answer yes or no, which was really clever. When Stony and I, so I'm talking to the people listening, when Stony and I decided that we were going to do this, the only school that would showed an interest from my side was a school in a very small island called Alderney. It made a really fascinating event that I, to this day, can't really describe how beneficial that was to the students involved.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we had gone through this process. So let's just put it in comparison. The year 10 class in Alderney had 15 students. How many students were they talking to in your year?
Probably it was an eighth grade geography class, and I'm trying to think, maybe 20, 21, 22, somewhere in that.
Okay,
that rough
and
number.
your I think the comparison was the number of students in your school was about 1,500. Was that right? That being about right?
I think grades 8 through 12, we probably had, I would say 1,000, 1,100. There were about 300 students in each class,
Yeah.
250 to 300, somewhere in there. So yeah, probably 1,200-ish, 1,100-ish in the whole school.
So the comparison was on the island of Alderney, that was the total population.
Wow, I remember that now.
So the contrast was huge. They loved playing it. They all got involved. It was fantastic. But the moment for me was at the end when so you had obviously done a mystery Skype before. Your students were prepared to tell us something about where they lived, and our students really weren't prepared. And it was a moment of, I've not prepared them, they're not going to engage here because they kept saying, well, there's nothing to do here again in Alderney, there's nothing to do. And then I don't know who asked, but I think a student in Arkansas asked about the students in Alderney said they went sea swimming after school, and the next thing we know is the students are picking up the laptop to show the Arkansas students the sea, and
Yes.
it was the coolest moment ever because they were so impressed. It was like the students in Alderney were somebody, had something important to share, something amazing, and it just made me realize at that moment that this is what a great collaboration could actually achieve. Mm-hmm. Is that you're giving purpose to your students. And I think the activity itself was important, but I think the personal learning journeys that our students went on had a much greater impact. Yes. It was amazing. So we then went and collaborated further.
Yes.
I think you touched on it slightly, didn't you, by talking about the events that I came to online. I seem to remember something that you were doing with your school librarians. Did you have an inset day? Or sorry, an inset day, a training day for your?
Oh, that's right. I had forgot about that. We invited. We had a training day at school, and you spoke to the other librarians in the district that came up, and we shared some of the things that we had done. And then we had a summer conference, and you did a session with me there. I remember we were nervous about it because we were hoping that the internet connection would be good enough for us to, and it did. Everything worked out, as I recall. There were a lot of people that came to that, which the summer conference wasn't as well attended typically as the spring conference. But I remember we had a full room that day. So, sharing the stories spread out and encourage those school librarians to go back and impact their schools. But then also we collaborated further that year, because I remember we sent a package. The kids got to pick what items that were significant in our country or in our state, in our town, and they put those in a package and sent them to Alderney, and then those students sent a package to us, but we didn't open it until the day that we had set aside just to meet and talk about those things. So the kids would come up to and show something that they had been sent, and then the other students would tell. So I thought it was a really awesome cultural exchange that we were able to do with that. That was a great day. So there's a lot of layers to this as we're talking and remembering.
It sort of threw up things that I hadn't really appreciated that it was going to. I think it led me to be braver in what I was trying to achieve. And I think, if I'm honest, I think my first reason for wanting to do it was that hook of, I've got something that's a little bit cool that I can bring to your classroom. Mm-hmm. But it was the hook to be able to do something else. So for me, it was to get a teacher to work collaboratively with me. It was to, I didn't do it this time, but would have been able to teach some kind of research skill to those students in order for them to be able to achieve that. And although I didn't do it at that stage, we were leading towards things that happened beyond that. And I think us sharing our event, the way we worked it, the way we managed it, really did inspire others. Do you remember us doing the Google Summit? So it was held here in Guernsey. And again, this was the first time that I could present live in a while. And I can't even remember what year. So that must have been pre-COVID. So that maybe it was 2018 even that year. And I invited you to come and do like this, come in virtually. And we shared our experience. And do you remember one of the teachers? I think we were the dog leg of the sessions. We were one of the last. And usually teachers are tired by the end of the day, aren't they? And I remember you coming up on the screen, and the teachers at the back of the classroom, which are always the ones that are the least engaged, were like, "Wow, this is like Star Wars,"
Yeah, I do remember that. I remember you making that comment, and I'd never done anything like that. So I was like, when you sent me the pictures, it was like, oh, that's pretty cool. I remember that, and they were probably really enjoying my country, Southern United States accent as well.
Yeah. It's just
they were laughing as they went, thinking, "Is this one of the Beverly Hillbillies?"
It certainly was just a real moment that we were. I think that for me was the moment that I realized that we were doing something that others weren't at that point. Mm-hmm. Especially in the UK, I don't think it was happening much at that point. And I think we were very lucky to have found that connection, but that collaboration and that willingness to work with each other. I think that made, so I used the word braver a bit earlier, and I think that bravery and reaching out sort of moved then on to all sorts of other kind of collaborations that I know that I did. Was there other, you connected with a lot of people in America, didn't you? Did you go anywhere beyond America?
Well, okay. So I'm going down memory lane here. I got involved with the Microsoft Educator Network, which was a wonderful opportunity. They invited me to attend a couple of conferences that they had for that group, and I got to meet some international educators through those channels. And I remember connecting, well, and Twitter and the blog. I was writing. I tried to write a blog article per week, one per week. I really was not doing much else except working and going home and writing about it, and working, going home, writing about it, and it got very, very busy. I got sucked into, the excitement of that, which is not a bad thing, but looking back, I probably should have balanced better and had a personal time and not been work. But we live and learn. But I do remember connecting with an educator in Spain, and we tested out Google Translator through not Google Translator. It was Microsoft Skype translator. So we did that, and that led to us connecting one of our Spanish classes, an AP Spanish class, to their students in Spain, and they got to practice speaking English and Spanish to each other. And I remember that really made those students from our classes super nervous, and I can imagine it was the same thing for that teacher in Spain. Connected with another teacher in and I'm trying to remember, it was it, I can't remember, so many different occurrences. I remember we connected with Japan, Vietnam. Was it Vietnam or South Korea? I think it was Vietnam. We connected with a school in Vietnam, and we had to do it very early. It was like 7 a.m. in the morning, and we did a mystery Skype with them. But that was through those Microsoft educator channels, and which of those things are still out there. They're on Facebook now. You can connect with. There's always somebody looking. What little I've kind of kept, a finger on the pulse of what's happening. But so yes, I mean, there were many other opportunities that came as a result of just the first time that you and I connected internationally, and it became exciting. It's like, okay, where can we connect next, and still do all the things that I'm supposed to be doing as a school librarian and technology support. That's why it became so busy. I don't think I could have physically and mentally continued at that pace without there being a cost to my health. So, but it was so much fun, and it was good to see kids and teachers getting excited about that sort of education experience, that we were helping provide.
Absolutely. But for me, it led to a connection with school children in India. So in year 4, children do an Indian project, and instead of it just being let's find out about, they were actually asking questions that made it relevant. You don't want them asking questions just randomly, so they really had to think about it. So as far as my role as the librarian, apart from doing the technology side, I was able to sort of help guide what is a good question, so that was good for me. I managed to bring a pilot in. Some students were doing a topic on air, I think it was, and our connection was a pilot who obviously has to fly in the air.
Sure.
But that was really cool, sort of we were pushing the boundaries to try and bring people into the classroom that you couldn't physically bring in, and that's really interesting when you think about it pre-COVID, because actually that's what it's turned into being, hasn't it? The technology has increased and changed. Do you think, though, like you mentioned just before, that you saw that people are still trying to connect, do you think that it's still as important today, those kind of connections, or do you think things have changed now that it's so easy to to, Zoom or Teams or whatever, that it's not such an exciting thing as it was. Do you think we've moved on?
I don't think so. I think the period with COVID, and of course, I stepped out of education right as that was moving into its worst phase. But looking at what my colleagues experienced, everything went between face to face and virtual, face to face and virtual. So teachers that really didn't want to use that technology were forced to embrace it. And I remember hearing about that and the struggles that went with it. But I think people are still connecting, but I think there's so much busyness in education. It's hard. It takes time. I mean, I had to set a lot of these events up on my personal time because that's when I had access to people. Or early in the morning, you and I would be sending messages back and forth to each other, and sometimes conversing about what we wanted to do. So it took a lot of time, and I don't know if educators have had, just thinking field wide, do they have that kind of time? And have they had that kind of time since 2020? And I'm going to think not. There's been a lot of moving parts and a lot of challenges. I think we're just now getting back. And to preface this, I just spent 8 months as a public librarian, and I did one event where we Skyped with the elephant sanctuary in Tennessee, neighboring state, and we had a crowd come to that. And I was told, "Oh, we've never done anything like this in the public library here." Now I'm in a very rural area, but there's 8,000 people in this town, so it's not extremely rural. And this was 2022 in the fall that we did this. So, and it was something new here. So I think it's still special. I think it's just time consuming to invest the time to do that sort of thing for your patrons, for your students. And I figure that's probably a challenge for a lot of school librarians. So I hope that as things improve, with COVID being in the background, hopefully these kinds of things can be explored again. And I think they're very special and important to do at every age.
Absolutely. I think, sorry, I think the worry of the connectivity and the technical side of it all will not be as such a big deal going forward. I think that side of it, but I agree. I think finding the time, I think it really has to add value to education as opposed to just being a really cool thing to do. And I think if you can potentially bring the two together, then hopefully the time will be found. Because much of what we talked about is about advocacy, isn't it? And using the tools available to us at the time to create the hook that would help us to work with teachers across the curriculum. I think that is probably still important today, and probably slightly easier because like I've just said, the technology is easier. Do you reckon? I think
so. I agree with that. Everything is much better. And it had been around for a few years when we were doing it, but there were still a lot of schools that I remember Skype being blocked and or Google Hangouts being blocked, and that piece is not an issue now. So I agree with you, and I think internet connectivity is faster and better, more reliable than it was almost 10 years ago. Gosh, I can't believe it's been that many years, but yeah, I think I think that I'm curious how many teachers. It would be interesting to do a survey and see how many people are connecting, because something else that we did probably the next year, this may have been 2017. I remember we, with our younger students, we read a book together. We read, what book did we read?
Wonder.
It was Wonder. And we used, what did we use to,
Flip.
anyway,
Flipgrid?
Flipgrid. It was Flipgrid, which
Oh,
now has changed. I noticed it has a different name now. Is it just Flip? Anyway, Flip. We did use Flipgrid, and that was because of the time difference. But
yeah.
the kids could make comments back and forth. Um, I think, where do people go to find out about these connections? We were using social media to form these relationships, and we stayed in touch. But I think the hard part is just finding people to connect with. So social media is really the place to go.
I do think social media is, and I think I have seen that there are, Facebook groups of school librarians, happy to talk about how they can connect. I think it's just, yeah, you're right. It's finding the time to make it happen. The new technologies have certainly made a difference, haven't they? We're not talking about mystery Skype anymore. We're talking Zoom or Teams. There are different ways to communicate via TikTok, and I know that you did a few TikTok videos, did you?
Mm-hmm. I've been experimenting with that. Yeah, we had a book locker at the public library, and my first TikTok, I think, was to show patrons very quickly, like a commercial type thing, how to use our book locker if they couldn't come during regular library times. And it got viewed like 700 or 800 times. I'm like, really? I thought this is a good place to put. Now somebody's looking at it.
Absolutely.
So I just think trying to find ways to reach the patrons, but then also build our own personal learning network, which is something I tell my graduate students all the time. You and I are perfect example of what can come from an ever growing PLN or personal learning network. We're always trying to expand and find people to challenge us and share what they're learning, so that we can share what we're learning, and keep challenging each other so we can be at our best for our patrons and students and teachers.
Absolutely. I'm going to pause just there a second. I'm going to take this opportunity to do a little bit of promotion. So I want to promote my membership to any schools looking for ways to support collaboration between the teacher and librarian, primarily in helping schools boost independent learning, literacy and well-being through your school library. If you're not sure how to make this happen, my membership program offers training and support for school librarians and teachers, and creates opportunities to create engagement across the whole curriculum. You can find out more information about engaging and empowering school libraries in the link in the show notes below. So let's move on to our final question, Stony. If you could give one piece of advice to school librarians listening to this who want to jump in and make their global connections more valuable, what would it be?
Well, I think look for opportunities on those Facebook groups, make connections, and if something sounds interesting and there's always a teacher that is willing to take a risk in your building, and those are the best ones to team up with. The year that you and I connected, it was Mr. Brooks Lee, the geography teacher, and he was willing to take that risk in our new facility that we had just opened after everything had been renovated. And I think that find somebody that's willing to take a risk that you can jump out there with. But then that's not enough. You need to not be afraid to tell your story on social media. And it's not bragging, it's sharing to inspire other people to do the same thing. So I would say make those connections on social media, and then tell your stories whenever you have an event. Because what happens is, on a Sunday afternoon, you may get a text message from somebody on another continent that has seen your post, and use those hashtags, and don't be afraid to get that out there, because you never know how it's going to change your building in your community, and through your actions of doing and sharing, it inspires people in other places, and every school librarian impacts their entire learning community. So that would be my advice. Don't be afraid to connect and then share.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for your time today, Stony. It's been wonderful to catch up with you and share our journey so far. Hopefully we've given those listening some inspiration to give this type of collaboration a go. Any tools we've talked about, I will put in the show notes below. And as always, if you'd like to comment on anything you've heard this evening, we would love to hear your thoughts. Don't forget to subscribe to my podcast so you don't miss out on future discussions. Thank you for listening, and good night.